And now let me introduce Professor Bruce Brown, who is responsible, one of the responsible for the quality assessment in artistic research, and especially is one of the representative of EQ Art. He graduated at the Royal College of Art in London, and now is visiting professor in the same institution. And during his international career, he chaired the main panels for arts and humanities in the UK Research Excellence Framework and the Research Assessment Exercise in 2008. Recently, he was appointed chairperson for the Creative Art Panel for the Hong Kong Research Assessment Exercise 2020, the Research Grants Panel for Fundação para a Ciência e a Tecnologia in Portugal, and the Review of Arts Doctoral Awards for the Estonian Quality Agency. He was one of 4 people invited by the Portuguese government to conduct an international review titled Reforming Arts and Culture Higher Education in Portugal. He also worked for Israel, Qatar, New Zealand, etc. So please welcome Professor Bruce Brown, who is going to speak now. Thank you very much. We are honored of your intervention.
Thank you. Well, I'm very conscious that when in Rome, I have to apologize for not being able to address you in Italian, but I will do my very best to speak clearly in Scottish throughout this presentation. Now, I've been asked to speak for 25 minutes, which I will try to keep to. And if I can share my presentation, I've been asked to speak on behalf of EQ Arts, which I'll explain in a minute, on quality assessment in artistic research and third cycle for the arts. Now, before I start this, which may be rather structural in its content, one of the things I would like to suggest is that at the end of the day, we all need to know why artistic research matters and why third cycle degrees or doctorates in the arts matter. And if you were asked that question, what would you say? My answer to this is, and there may be many answers, my answer is that in the 20th century, a very well-known economist called Letheby said that the world was suffering from 3 poverties. The first poverty was famine, the second poverty was disease, and the third poverty was war. In the 21st century, I'd like to add one further poverty to that. Given the problems we face, I think we are suffering from a poverty of imagination. And what's happened is that all of the logical forms of research and examination are not delivering the radical results we need to deal with big issues like climate change and political instability and so on. And it's through a doctorate in the arts that I believe these properties of imagination can be applied to real-world problems that are a benefit to society. So it is essential for me. Now let me just go through and explain, first of all, what EQ Arts is and some of the issues that we have been involved with as we've done our work. Now, first of all, EQ Arts is an independent agency, and we're listed on the European Quality Assurance Register. And so we have powers of accreditation when asked to undertake some work looking at proposals for degrees, whether first, second, or third cycle. EQ Arts also specializes in quality assurance across the arts and design, which is very important when you're dealing with accreditation or awarding bodies that have a broad range of experience and are not so conversant with research in the arts. And we can offer a bridge which helps to translate some of those characteristics into the mainstream system. And I have to say that one of the items on EQ Arts' plan is to be a champion of the development of artistic research across Europe and of third cycle degrees. And in doing this work, we've undertaken reviews on behalf of national accreditation agencies and institutions. So I'd like to say a little bit about the structure of this validation process, because one of the things I think the previous speaker has already pointed out, that the picture across Europe is very, very different. There are some countries where PhDs and third cycle doctorates have grown enormously in the last 5 to 10 years, and there are others where it is impossible almost to get accreditation or alliance to be involved in doctoral work. So the elements in this kind of cycle of approval are accreditation agencies, and the role of an accreditation agency is to award a license, and it licenses a body to award a degree at a particular level, and in this case it would be third cycle degrees. So theirs is a legal role, and these are usually based at the level of a country operation. The second part of this chain is the awarding body. Now, the role of the awarding body is to award the degrees, and the awarding body rather deals with the governance of the process. So it's how you deal with examination procedures, how you deal with ongoing quality assurance, and how you deal with the appeals process. So the awarding body will make a proposal to an accreditation agency to be licensed, and that proposal will include these governing characteristics. The third element in this is the teaching institution, and its role is to deliver the academic program, and that is the academic content of the program, along with assessment and examination. And if there were any changes to that program, then it would normally be proposed and agreed to by the awarding body. And of course, in many cases, the awarding body and the teaching institution may be the same institution. They may not be separate. So in a university, say, for example, that has a faculty of arts, the teaching institution might be part of the governance framework of that body. However, the picture across Europe is that in many of the specialist institutions for the arts, they do not have the broad infrastructural arrangements that allow them to easily gain a legal license to award doctoral programs. So what they do, many, is they go, there are some exceptions of course, but what they do is they go to an awarding body that has a license and seeks to work through them. So accreditation agencies are national agencies that offer a legal license to award these third cycle degrees. The awarding body is usually a university or academy, and the specialist arts institutions often deliver the program, either if they're accredited, but that's highly unusual. Sometimes it's true, but mostly under the governance of an awarding body, which is a university academy. Now, alongside this, these agencies are within a country. Alongside this sits EQ Arts. And EQ Arts is an independent body that does not have any legal powers other than the process of accreditation. And what EQ Arts will do is to work with a national agency if it's received a proposal, a doctoral proposal in the arts from an awarding body. And it may be contracted to advise that national agency on whether the award should be considered to be licensed or considered not to be licensed. It is then up to the national agency, the accreditation agency, to decide whether to accept that recommendation or not. Now, these licenses usually last for a period. They sometimes last for 5 years, and there is therefore a renewal. And at that point, EQ Arts works independently on a revalidation process after 5 years to see if the standards are being maintained and to ensure that all of the things that are agreed in the license are being undertaken and seen through. But of course, the role that EQ Arts has here is also an enhancement role. It's not simply to deliver threshold standards, but it's to ensure the continuous improvement of the work and of the program. And if there are institutions that simply cannot find a way of being licensed to offer degrees at third cycle, and these are specialist institutions like the art academies, then EQ Arts can engage with them, offering reviews. And these do not go to national agencies or universities. These stay within the ownership of the specialist institution. And these advise the institution on their current development, maturity, and what they may need to do to meet the requirements of accreditation. So EQ Arts works in that forum as an independent agency outside countries. And as you will see in a minute, EQ Arts does not impose requirements on countries or universities on the nature of a degree. It simply offers us best practices and offers judgments on them. The licensing and the character of the degree stays with the awarding body and with the accreditation agency, not with EQ Arts. So the advantages of EQ Arts having this role in accreditation is because of its expertise in areas of artistic research and quality assurance and enhancement in the arts. And the second is, and this is important, what EQ Arts can offer, because it works across countries, is an equivalence of standards between institutions and across borders. And this is very important because if a student in one country enters a third cycle doctoral award, they would want to know that the quality of that award or the level of that award is the same as it would be in another country. It's not higher, it's not lower, but there is an equivalence of standards. And that's something that EQ Arts can help to moderate. And the third advantage is that it offers a transferability between other countries, organizations and employers. And you will see later when we talk about types of doctorates, certainly where employers are involved, there are issues of trust here, and particularly with parents as well who are maybe funding their children to undertake doctoral degrees. The trust issue is very important. What EQ Arts offers is a guarantee of standards which allows employers, parents and other organizations to engage with it and to offer other forms of transferability. Now, the work that we do is encapsulated in this brochure, and I'll tell you at the end of the talk where you can find this if you would like to receive it as a free download. This was written for, and you'll hear about it later, an experiment called the CRD, which is the Creator Doctus program, which was an Erasmus Plus program. And it was specifically aimed at doctoral degrees in practice-based areas where the substantial body of the thesis may not be textual. It may be in non-textual forms. And a characteristic of this award also was that a requirement of each program was that it had to work with a societal partner as part of the program's work. Now, what EQ Arts has done here is to provide a framework of good practices, not simply for the Creator Doctus program, but the practice you would expect for all doctoral programs seeking accreditation. So this handbook could be valuable to anybody who wants to use it. And as I say, there will be a free download at the end, the link for it. Now, I can't go into all of the details of this, but I'd like to just talk about a few contextual issues. I've tried to explain why I think that PhDs are important in society today. There are two other reasons. Doctoral awards are educating researchers of the future. And it is a big investment in what the future of artistic research will be like in 10, 20, 30 years. And if we don't invest now, we will not have that reward in the future. So that pipeline is important. But the other thing that's very important with a good doctoral program is that the students who graduate often go on to different careers. They don't always stay in the arts. And they often hold very influential positions in different types of organizations. So what the PhD provides is a network of influential graduates that themselves can become opinion makers. So generally, there are a lot of gains in third cycle awards that are beyond the curriculum and the design of it. Now, let me just kind of go across that we would talk about. They may seem basic, but they're often important to reiterate in accreditation exercises. We would expect somebody proposing a third cycle degree to be very clear about what they consider the purpose of the doctorate is. And there is often some confusion about this and what the balance is. Now, I'm not saying the following examples are absolute. They are simply examples, and you may, in the audience, have different answers to some of these questions. So the first purpose of our doctorate, I would say, is research training. And what it does, it provides research training in the arts, especially where non-textual forms of research evidence are prevalent. And that's very important because most accreditation systems run through, if they're not through specialist institutions in the arts, they run through modern universities where still in accreditation processes, the discovery sciences are very much the dominant part of the methodology. But here there is a different methodology, which is dealing with visual or other forms of non-textual evidence. And one of the things I think we all have to accept is that because these sorts of degrees have not been running for so long, there is still a lot of work to do to develop new forms of scholarship that embrace types of evidence such as images, objects, environments, or an integration of these with text. And the balance is something a matter of judgment in each specific case. But the scholarship of the traditional discovery sciences is very useful for those forms of activity. What we need to develop is new forms of scholarship for particular areas of activity in the artistic research. And that is still something that's maturing. The second purpose of a doctorate, I would say, is new insights. Say to add to the knowledge pool of an academic field or a professional area. And here I've chosen the words carefully. It's new insights rather than new knowledge. And I'll come back to this later. There is a view in discovery science that the purpose is new knowledge. Well, actually, in many areas of the arts, the priority is to contest existing knowledge in order to discover its limitations. And that's a very different objective. And that's particularly true in the fine arts, I would say. But what that leads to is new insights. And it's those insights that matter. So the role is, in terms of insight, to add to the knowledge pool. And that is by questioning the boundaries of existing knowledge in order to determine its limitations. The third purpose is personal development. And I find that this isn't often profiled as much as it should be. And what a doctoral experience will do, a good one, is to help each doctoral student develop the intellectual and creative scaffolding to manage many forms of complexity in a fragile world. And it's often for this reason that doctoral students, whether in artistic research or another area, go into other professions or other forms of activity in which the intellectual scaffolding they have developed is a valuable commodity in helping to solve problems and to deal with complex situations. So that in that very particular sense, the doctoral experience has an integrated quality that is valuable in itself. Now, many of the doctoral proposals that we see don't really balance out these three priorities. Some don't mention research training, or if they do, it's very inconsequential. Some don't really mention research development, but these are balances that we need to try and flesh out in each of the proposals. Let me say a little bit about the context for the doctorate, and this is something else that we have come across, is firstly, doctoral programs in the arts are recent. They only emerged 15 to 20 years ago. And I have been involved in research assessment in the UK for 30 years. And I can say it was only after the first research assessment exercises in 1980 that doctoral programs began to explode. And the growth of doctoral programs in the UK has been exponential. But it has been in response to those very formal processes of research assessment. And I've already mentioned in the practice-based arts, we need new types of scholarship for the types of doctorates that are emerging. But the final point is that alongside the traditional PhD, there have been many career routes that have emerged for people involved in the arts, candidates involved in the arts. And in the last 10 years or so, there's been the emergence of what's called professional doctorates, or practice-based doctorates, or practice-led doctorates. And one of the difficulties is that they're slightly different in design. And one of the difficulties has been that when an institution proposes a PhD to an awarding body as practice-led, what they're really proposing is a professional PhD. And it gets turned down because it has not addressed itself as that. And if you kind of look at it in a broader sense, what the characteristics are, a subject specialist doctorate, which is the most common and long-standing type of research degree, that's a PhD, it focuses on original research that contributes new insights and understandings to an academic field. What the professional doctorate will do, and it's most recently emerging, and some of the examples of it are a doctorate in fine art, a doctorate of music, doctorate in performing arts, and the Creator Doctus program, which I mentioned earlier, which came through the Erasmus program. But what the professional doctorate will do, it's intended for practitioners and or professionals who have work experience and mastery of a profession that could be advanced by the application of research to that professional area. So it's not a contribution to the academic field, it's a contribution to the professional area. So subject specialist doctorates offer new insights and understandings in an academic field through research. Professional doctorates advance professional practices or organizational structures through the application of research. And often we have to remember, whatever these categorizations are, that all doctorates are research degrees, whatever type they are, and they have to have a foundation in research. So if we come back to this, having made those broad comments, if we come back to this framework of good practices, and which I can't go through in detail, and I think I'm soon coming out of time, this is the contents of this, which I think you would probably find all of the issues that needed to be dealt with explained. And if EQ Arts was approached by an accreditation authority, these are the types of things we would advise them to pay attention to in order to ensure that an institution should be licensed to award a third cycle degree. And most of these things, in fact, are not different to the things you would find in a standard PhD or a standard doctorate in other areas, other fields of research in the sciences or the social sciences. There are some, however, that are slightly different. And if I can just mention a couple, the admission criteria are quite important with areas of artistic research and how an application is judged. Normally, in discovery science, the student would be expected to be clear about the research questions they were going to ask. Often in artistic research, the student is not clear at the beginning of the work what the questions are, but they go through a process of excavation, and it is only by the end of the research do they have clarity on the research questions that led that work to a conclusion. Now that places a big pressure on the supervisors and the admissions process, because you have to put some kind of caution in at the beginning that the student is not going to flounder in the first year of their study, and that the supervisors are well qualified and experienced to deal with this. Now, the second point about this I'd raise is in supervision. I mean, I think I can honestly say that not all good artists or artistic researchers make good supervisors. Some do, some don't. And not all supervisors are good arts practitioners. And there's not a straight equivalence there. But in order to protect the student, it is very, very important that the institution has some form of training supervisors in areas of artistic research and updating that supervision regularly so that people are aware of developing standards, new practices, and the things that are happening in other institutions. Now, the final thing I'd like to just comment on before I stop, and I'm happy to answer questions on the detail if you want to know more, is the question of examination. Now, there are a number of issues about the construction of the Board of Examiners, which I'll not deal with, which is a complex process and needs attention. What I'd like to deal with, though, is what is submitted for examination. And in most cases, it is described as a substantial body of work. Now, in artistic research, that substantial body of work may include objects, environments, sounds. It may include text, it may be all text, it may be non-text. It depends on the institution and what they decide is most appropriate. However, if there's a viva voce examination and the examiners understand that substantial body of work when the doctoral candidate is present and explains it, but if that body of work is not intelligible once the doctoral candidate has left the room, that is something to consider. Because in artistic research, I would say, like in any other area of research, if you're adding to the pool of knowledge, you need to produce a substantial body of work that is both discoverable and accessible by a remote audience, maybe 10 or 20 years in the future. And that does not always depend on the doctoral candidate being there to explain it. So that final body of work for the examination is something that each institution has to think about carefully and how they frame it. So I think I will stop at that stage and allow questions if you want them. And if you did want this pamphlet, which would help your discussions, if you go on the EQ Arts website, eqarts.org, if you go to downloads, and then you take the title of this pamphlet, you can find a free downloadable PDF there. So I will stop.
Thank you.